Welcome to The Complete Works, an official podcast of FilmBook. The Complete Works is a podcast that delves film by film into the filmography of a Hollywood actor, director, writer, or composer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Complete Works podcast, a film podcast brought to you by FilmBook. My name is Doug Hess. Now, if you're tuned into the Complete Works podcast for the first time, what I do on this podcast is discuss a specific movie from a film actor, actress, director, or composer's film career. Currently, I'm working my way through Tom Cruise's career, and in this episode of the Complete Works podcast, I'll be discussing the film The Color of Money. You can find out more information about the Complete Works podcast simply by looking at FilmBook, or that's film-book.com, or by searching the term The Complete Works. If you're listening to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or another podcast service, please rate and review this episode. If you're listening to the podcast on YouTube, please like our video, subscribe, and consider becoming one of our patrons on Patreons at patrons.com/FilmBook. Your support helps us create more engaging content. All right, as I mentioned, we are going to be looking at Tom Cruise's film, The Color of Money, released in 1986, and it runs for about an hour and 59 minutes. It stars Paul Newman in there as well. Before we jump into the overall view of The Color of Money, basically this is Fast Eddie teaches a cocky but immensely talented protege the ropes of pool hustling, which in turn inspires him to make an unlikely comeback. Now, Paul Newman is Fast Eddie, and Tom Cruise is playing Vincent in this film. But we'll get into all that here in just a few minutes. About this, I wanted to let you know what I really thought about the film, The Color of Money, like I said, 1986, in terms of this. So, been a while since I had seen the film, so I wanted to go back, watch it, and kind of refresh my memory from 1986. What I did not remember, and I'm kind of glad that I had a chance to look at this again, was it was directed by Martin Scorsese. So you know Martin Scorsese is a wonderful film director. It was it's a really exciting piece of work that he did. I think it's one of his better films, and not to downplay any of his films. I think they're all fabulous, but at some point you have to kind of rank them in terms of that. And I think The Color of Money really ranks up there when it comes to some work as a director. One thing I will say that this is really not an exciting film because it's about pool. And how exciting can you kind of get into playing pool? Now, most of us has played pool for recreation, maybe at a bar, went in there and shot a round or two of pool, talked to some buddies, etc. None of us, or not a lot of us, maybe plays for money. Some do. Not everybody does. But in terms of that, I never really thought it was an exciting film in that sense. A lot of action. Of course, there is action with some trick shots and stuff like that. But when it just comes to a pure, simple, exciting film, it's not that. However, it does have other attributes that I really enjoyed in this. So it's not a electrifying film. But it is some good work based on the fact that there's a good story to tell within this. Okay? So it's my understanding that Martin may have thought of this film as deliberately mainstream work, a conventional film that had some very big names in it, had I would say a popular subject matter, especially in the 80s. Why he picked this film, I really don't know. I was trying to do some research in that, but those are some things that kind of comes to mind in terms of that. Now, this film is not necessarily a sequel because this film happens 25 years after The Hustler that was released in 1961. So The Color of Money is not necessarily a sequel exactly, but it does start with some new, fresh inspiration in this. And it does continue to tell the story of Fast Eddie Fausen, the character that is played by Paul Newman. Okay. So, like I said, 25 years has passed. Eddie still plays pool. He's not doing it for money anymore. He's actually, or any type of high stake drama. But he is actually a salesman and very successful one based on some of the money that he has. And I would say the car that he's driving, the Cadillac. So one day he's in a bar and he sees this kid playing pool, and the kid is good, and that actually stirs some memories for Eddie in terms of that. So, like I said, it's not an action-packed film, but it's a good film in terms of that. In terms of that, some other things that I think is very interesting in terms of this. So, Vincent, played by Tom Cruise. Eddie doesn't approach Tom Cruise, but he actually approaches Vincent's girlfriend. In terms of that, she's a few years older than Vince. She's a lot tougher than him. Maybe you've been around, seen some things that Vince hasn't seen in terms of that. So she's got a little experience on Vince and around pool hustling. But Eddie sees her as a way to get to Vince, and he also kind of gets a sense that she is a little bored in terms of that. So, again, I'm telling you all this because, again, not a very exciting film, not in terms of that, but more of a slow film that is kind of picking up steam in the process. I thought a lot of the early scene setups were handled pretty well, especially the moments when Eddie used Carmen, which is his girlfriend, to make Vince jealous and undermine his self-confidence. Now, again, you got to remember Eddie's doing all this with a purpose in this. These scenes, like I said, I think work well because they're part of a story that is, I'm going to say, close to the director's own sensibility in terms of that. I think it made it more believable in terms of that. And the reason I'm kind of hesitating is because if I'm thinking back on some of Martin Scorsese's early films, he helps by picking a good, strong woman role and developing that and using her or that role as a pivotal point in the film. And if you think of shows like Taxi Driver or Raging Bull, in that relationship with women, there's a sense of energy that is coming from Vince and Vincent's love for Carmen. And that kind of works well for the film there. When it comes to Fast Eddie or Paul Newman's character, maybe there's less development of the character because he is a character from The Hustler from 25 years ago. That character has kind of already been set and is complete. And there's really nothing, I don't say new to bring to the table, but it's not as fresh as with Vincent and Carmen in terms of that. So that Character, like I said, had already been set because it's bringing something in from 25 years ago. And most of us had seen The Hustler, kind of already knows what that role is with Fast Eddie. So just some food for thought when it comes in there. There are also some moments of crisis in the story. Basically, when you see Vincent allows himself to be hustled at pool, he thinks he's really clever, he thinks he's really cool, and he's unstoppable. And yet he finds himself being kind of taken out by maybe, it's fair to say, with his own ego or his own desire to be good. It kind of got the best of him in terms of that. So there is that moment in the film as well. Is there a weakness when it comes to The Color of Money? I think to some case, yes. There's kind of a little bit of a gap there in genres in this story, and the way that Hollywood kind of develops a lot of these stories. First, there's a basic story of the old versus the new. So you have Fast Eddie being the old pro, and then you also have Vincent being the new guy, or the talented youngster that has a lot of potential in there. So I think there's that basic story is being underlined or told in there. Again, there's also many scenes in this movie that are almost, for lack of a better word, kind of like a formula where you insert character here, and there's that formula, like I said, that is developed through Hollywood. Even though I think the director tried to bring his own performance, if you will, his own direction into the film, there just felt like there was a little bit of a formula or a plot that was like, I've seen this setup before in terms of that. So a couple of things there. I would say eventually everything points to the ending of the film, in which we have a showdown again versus the young versus the old, or Eddie versus Vincent, which is Newman versus Tom Cruise in this. The fact that the movie does not provide that playoff scene is a little bit of a disappointment. Perhaps the director really thought the movie was really about the personalities of the two heroes, and then it was maybe a little unnecessary to show who would win in an actual showdown. And again, who would it have been? Would it have been Fast Eddie, or would it have been Vincent? Does the pro get beat with the new young talent, and then that sets up for the future? Or does the old pro come in and just hands it down and wins? I think that was something that I'm assuming that Martin had a little bit of a struggle with, and was trying to decide how that film was going to end and how it should kind of work there in terms of that. And so the way he ended it, I think, was a perfect way in terms of that. As in any formula, when it comes to writing a movie, there's the main, but there's also some side stories that are within the story itself. We see this all the time, especially a lot of times we don't even think about it because it's just worked in, but that is the formula that's working in. There's always some side stories in terms of that. One of those is with Paul Newman and his longtime girlfriend, a bartender who was played by Helen Shaver. In terms of that, it's a little bit has a little bit of energy that's interjected there in terms of that. And then you have Cruise and his girlfriend, and that relationship and that energy that's being placed in there as well. A couple things about here. Watching Newman, or Paul Newman is always interesting when it comes to movies. He's really a star, a true star, and has been or had been for many years before this movie came up in '86. I think sometimes when you have a veteran actor like a Paul Newman, sometimes that star power or that performance can be lost or thrown away. I think we all obviously know that we have the upcoming superstar Tom Cruise in this film as well. But I really don't think that the director allowed that to happen. And I think there were some great performances. Obviously, Paul Newman goes on to win the Academy Award. So an opportunity that could have went sour or south very quickly didn't, and I think that just really speaks to the volume and the professionalism and just the acting ability that somebody like a Paul Newman has, and how he brings things to the table in terms of this. During my research, I did find that Paul Newman had veto power over who would make this movie, because how they could make it without him, or could they have made it without him, really becomes the question. I don't think that is true, but I think the pick of Martin Scorsese, excuse me, I can't even talk right now, was an excellent choice, and really kind of saved that film, because this could have went south very quickly, this film. But I think with the director and the cast, it was definitely something that was saved in terms of that. So overall, that's kind of a brief overview of what I thought of the film. Here at the end, I'll give you what I think on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being terrible and 10 being just outstanding. I'll give you that here in a second. But just wanted to hit some highlights where I thought the film brought in some good points in terms of that. When it comes to some of the different characters, like I said, I think Paul Newman's character definitely sticks with me. Kind of reprising a role from 25 years, bringing it to the table, and really having that commanding presence on the film. The other thing I think is interesting is, you've got the veteran of Paul Newman, and you got this upcoming rock star that we eventually find out is Tom Cruise, and how that chemistry between the two of them worked on this film, and I thought it worked beautifully in terms of that, which could have went south pretty easy if they would have let it. I think I mentioned a little bit with Helen Shaver, that relationship and her presence on or in the film also was a strong performance in there. Some other individuals that's in there that we see. We have, let's see who we have. Bill Cobbs, but we also have Ron Dinn that's in there. Not overly powerful performances, but they are there, and they add a little bit of value to it. If I want to look at other films of that genre, I always have to stop and think about this, because it's a tough one. Because you want to get it right. And one of them is, I'm thinking of a Tom Cruise film, All the Right Moves, that we've already talked about. um, is something that comes to mind in terms of that. Obviously, The Hustler from 1961, in terms of that as well. Some other films that kind of comes to mind would be Wall Street with Michael Douglas, The Bonfire of Vanities with Tom Hanks is in that one. In terms of that, Goodfellas, Rain Man, Sex Lies and Videotapes. Those are all movies that kind of come to mind as I'm thinking of something that is in the same genre, if you will, or similar movies into that. One thing I'm going to tell you right now is Wall Street is one of my favorite movies. It was released in '87, a year later, starring Michael Douglas, playing Gordon Gekko. He kind of reminds me in a small way of Fast Eddie in terms of that and that character. One of my favorite movies of all time. So it's hard for me to give an honest opinion about anything going up against Wall Street, just because I really enjoyed that film. Rain Man, starring Tom Cruise, we'll be talking about in future episodes. Goodfellas is another film that the director made. So those are all films, are excellent films. I enjoyed watching all those films. But how does The Color of Money hold up to that? I think remarkably well. In terms of some of these films, other films like Wall Street and Rain Man and Goodfellas, I think get more attention than The Color of Money. But I really think if we're being honest and we're looking at this, honestly, I think The Color of Money really holds up well against those films as well. Pretty strong. The unfortunate thing is it just doesn't get the credit that some of these other films, like, Goodfellas is like a cult classic. Rain Man, Dustin Hoffman's performance in that, and with Tom Cruise, Wall Street, powerful performance, and we're still talking about Gordon Gekko all these years later. So Color Money, I think, is right up there with them. It just doesn't get the respect and love that it deserved in terms of that. Would I say this is a good? Yeah, actually, I really enjoyed this film on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being terrible, 10 being just outstanding, out of the park. I'm going to give it a 7 in terms of films. I think it, like I said, doesn't get the respect that it deserves. It's a better film than I think it gets the credit for. And when I say the credit, because it's going up against a lot of other good movies in the 80s, and I think it gets overlooked. Like I said, Paul Newman and both Tom Cruise were outstanding in the film when it comes to performances. And, like I said, it won some awards, won an Oscar in terms of that. And it had 10 different nominations out there as well. We'll take a look at it. It was in 1987, Paul Newman wins Best Actor in a Leading Role. Also for an Oscar nominee in 1987, Best Actress was Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, plays Vincent's girlfriend. I wasn't as high on that scale, but again, I want to give her props. It was nominated for an Oscar for Best Writing Screenplay based on material from another medium by Richard Price, and also a nominee for Best Art Direction, Set Decorated.